The rain hammered down in sheets, turning the sidewalks into rivers and drowning the city's usual hum in a storm's fury. In the middle of it all, a young woman stumbled through the chaos, her clothes soaked, her face pale from exhaustion, and her arms clinging desperately to the strap of a worn backpack. Her name was Reina Cortez, 27 years old, once a hopeful artist with dreams of painting the world, now reduced to a wanderer with no roof over her head. Every step she took that day was a battle against both the storm and the weight of her shattered past. She hadn't eaten properly in days. Her shoes, splitting at the seams, made squelching sounds with every step. She looked like someone who had lost everything, and in truth, she had. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of one stranger's help to change a life, then please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Keenness Journal. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts around the world. Reina had not meant to end up on that street. The bus had taken her farther than expected, and the storm had forced her off at the first stop she could find. She remembered staring at the glow of a small hardware store's window, where behind the glass stood a man rearranging shelves. He looked like he belonged there, steady and grounded, as though no storm could ever touch him. She almost walked past, too embarrassed to ask for help, but her body betrayed her. She collapsed against the awning, shivering, until the sound of the door opening brought her face to face with him. His name was Elias Hart, a 35-year-old carpenter and shop owner with shoulders broad from years of work and hands calloused from shaping wood into beauty. He had a rugged face softened by kind eyes, and when he saw her crumpled figure, his instincts didn't hesitate. Without questions, without judgment, he helped her to her feet and guided her into the store. The warmth hit her instantly, the dry air almost foreign after the punishing rain. She wanted to thank him, to explain herself, but the words caught in her throat. All she could whisper was, "I'm sorry." Elias offered her a seat on an old wooden stool by the counter and handed her a towel. He didn't pry into her story, didn't demand answers she wasn't ready to give. Instead, after a few minutes of silence broken only by her trembling breaths, he said simply, "I've got a spare bed in the back. It's not much, but it's dry and warm. You can rest there for tonight." Reina's heart nearly broke from the weight of that kindness. He promised her nothing more than a bed, but for someone who had been sleeping under overpasses and bus stops, it felt like a lifeline. The bed was small, tucked into a modest room behind the store, but to Reina it felt like a palace. She lay down, the blanket smelling faintly of cedar and soap, and for the first time in weeks, her body gave into deep, dreamless sleep. She didn't know that Elias lingered by the doorway for a moment, watching to make sure she was safe before turning off the light. The days that followed were hesitant steps into something neither of them expected. Reina thought she would stay one night and leave before she became a burden, but Elias noticed her thin frame, the way her stomach growled when she thought no one could hear, and quietly began leaving small meals for her. Bowls of soup, slices of bread, a cup of tea. At first she resisted, ashamed of needing so much, but hunger won, and the moment that warm food touched her lips, tears streamed down her face. She realized then how long it had been since someone cared whether she ate. Elias wasn't a man of many words, but he was observant. He noticed the way Reina traced her fingers along the wood carvings in his shop, the way her eyes lit up at the sight of paints on a shelf. One evening, when the storm had finally passed and golden sunlight spilled through the windows, he set a small wooden easel and a few half-used paints on the counter. "Thought you might want these," he said simply. Reina stared at them, unable to speak. That night, with shaking hands, she picked up a brush again. The strokes were clumsy at first, but as the hours passed, the colors began to breathe life onto the canvas, and she felt a flicker of herself return. But healing wasn't simple. Shadows of her past still haunted her. Reina had once been engaged to a man who promised love but delivered control and cruelty instead. When she finally broke free, she found herself with nothing, no savings, no family nearby, no safe place to land. The world had turned its back on her, and she had convinced herself she deserved it. Even as Elias offered her kindness, she wrestled with guilt, afraid to believe she had a right to warmth and safety. Elias saw those battles in her eyes, though she never voiced them. He respected her silence, never pressing her to reveal what she wasn't ready to share. But he made sure she knew she wasn't invisible. He fixed her shoes one morning without telling her. He left the store's heater on a little longer when nights grew colder. He made space for her paintings on a wall in the back, as though her art belonged there as much as his woodwork. Slowly, piece by piece, Reina's walls began to crack. One particularly cold evening, when the wind howled outside and the shop creaked against the storm, Reina sat by the heater, clutching a mug of tea Elias had made for her. She looked at him across the room, sanding down a piece of oak, and whispered, "Why are you doing this for me?" He paused, wiped the dust from his hands, and met her gaze. "Because everyone deserves a place to feel safe," he said. "And because I think you've forgotten that you matter." Her chest tightened with emotions she couldn't name. It had been so long since anyone spoke to her like that, with no agenda, no conditions, just honesty. In that moment, the room didn't feel like a stranger's shop anymore. It felt like a shelter her heart had been searching for all along. Days turned into weeks, and Reina began to help Elias around the shop. She swept floors, organized tools, and even learned small woodworking tasks. Together they created an unspoken rhythm. Two wounded souls building something steady from the wreckage of their pasts. The bed Elias had promised was still there, but now Reina found more than shelter. She found warmth in the way he remembered how she liked her tea. She found comfort in the sound of his laugh, rare but genuine. She found home in a place she never expected. One morning, as the sun poured into the shop and lit up her latest painting of a blossoming tree, Reina felt a shift inside her. She realized she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living again. She had a roof, food, and most of all, she had someone who saw her not as a burden but as a person worth caring for. Elias hadn't given her grand promises. He had simply offered a bed. But in his quiet, steadfast way, he had given her heat when the world left her cold, food when hunger gnawed her spirit, and a sense of belonging when she had none. If this story has touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Journal. Your engagement helps spread more stories of hope and second chances to those who need them most. And before we end, we'd love for you to comment below with one word, hum. If this story reminded you of the power of kindness to change lives. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person's quiet act of compassion to turn a stranger's night of despair into a lifetime of healing. Elias offered just a bed, but to Reina, he gave back her dignity, her dreams, and the truth she had long forgotten: she was never unworthy of love.